What if you could actually argue with death itself and win? Well, that's exactly what the poet John Donne did like 400 years ago. And get this, he did it during an age of plague and constant uncertainty, which just makes his defiance that much more incredible. He basically built this airtight 14-line legal case against our biggest fear, all designed to just completely tear down its power. So yeah, let's dive into this brilliant takedown. So Donne doesn't ease into it at all. Nope. He just kicks the door down with this direct challenge to death. I mean, can you imagine the confidence? He's not just talking about death, he's talking to it. He's literally telling death to, check its ego at the door. This isn't some polite request, it's a throwdown. It sets the stage for the complete destruction of death's entire reputation. Okay, so Donne's first move, it's a classic debate tactic, right? He attacks the entire premise. He's basically saying that death's whole reputation is just built on a giant misunderstanding. It's not mighty, it's not dreadful, and he is about to lay out exactly why. And this right here, this is the central argument of the whole poem. Donne is basically demoting death. He's taking it from this all-powerful, terrifying force and knocking it down to just a temporary, misunderstood, and ultimately a totally powerless event. I mean, what a radical way to reframe our whole relationship with mortality. And you gotta love the tone here. He calls it poor death. How condescending is that? It's like he's patting death on the head, saying, "Oh, you think you're winning, but you don't even get how the game is played." The key takeaway here is his claim that death doesn't really kill anyone. Not in a permanent way, at least. All right, so if death isn't the end, then what is it? This is where Donne brings in his first piece of evidence. And honestly, it's a brilliant comparison. He's about to argue that we all get a little taste of death every single night, and, well, we actually kind of love it. So he calls rest and sleep death's pictures. Think of them like a sketch or a cheap copy of the real thing. His logic is super simple, but really effective. If we get so much pleasure from the copy, sleep, then imagine how much better the original must be. It's an amazing trick, right? He's turning our fear into something we should actually look forward to. And he just keeps going. He doubles down on this. He says the best men, the most virtuous people, they're the ones who welcome death the earliest. And why is that? Because they get it. They know it's not a punishment. It's a release. It's the soul's delivery, basically freeing your spirit from your body. But wait, Donne is far from finished. He's made death seem less scary. Now he's going to make it seem weak, kind of pathetic, actually. He argues that death isn't some powerful king calling the shots. Nah, it's just a lowly servant taking orders from others. And this next line, it's a total knockout punch. Donne is saying death has absolutely no free will. Zero. It doesn't get to choose who it takes. It's just a tool, a clumsy weapon used by all these other forces. Some of them are grand, like fate, but some are just pathetic, like a desperate person. And just look at the company it keeps. Poison, war, sickness. Doesn't sound so mighty anymore, does it? I mean, just think about it. You can picture death as a puppet, right? With its strings being pulled by all these other things. It's just the effect. It's never the cause. It's basically on the payroll of kings who start wars, or of just random chance when there's an accident, or of sickness. It's not a master. It's more like a cosmic errand boy. Okay, this next argument might be the most insulting one of all. Donne points out that we humans, we've invented stuff like medicine, he calls it poppy or charms, that can put us to sleep just as well as death can, and usually a lot more gently. So his point is, if we can get the same result with our own, better methods, why on earth would we be impressed by death's crude, violent stroke? And all of this leads to his big mic drop question. After everything he's laid out, proving death is just a better version of sleep, that it's a slave to chance, that it's not even as good as our medicine, why are you still so arrogant? Why swelleth thou then? He's looking death right in the eye and asking, what exactly do you have to be so proud of? But of course, Donne saves his most brilliant, most mind-bending argument for the very end. This is the checkmate. It's the final twist that doesn't just defeat death, it completely erases it from the board. So he kicks off the conclusion by going back to that sleep metaphor. He admits, okay, yeah, we do experience death, but he frames it as just one short sleep. It's temporary, just a quick nap in the grand scheme of everything. And here comes the turn. What happens after that short sleep? We wake up. But we don't just wake up to another Tuesday morning. We wake up eternally. See, in the Christian framework that Donne is working with, death is just the doorway to everlasting life, a place where death literally can't touch us ever again.
And this brings us to the ultimate fatal paradox. Just think about it for a second. The very act of death, doing its job, is what causes its own destruction. Every time it takes a person into that short sleep, it's actually just pushing them into eternal life, a place where death doesn't even exist. So with every single soul it takes, death is basically destroying its own power. Until, as Donne so triumphantly puts it, death, thou shalt die.
I mean, it's just so powerful. And this argument has resonated with people for more than 400 years. It's a real testament to the power of perspective, right? He uses logic and language not to deny that death happens, but to completely rob it of its terror. It flips the script and turns the victim into the victor. Which really leaves us with a final thought. John Donne built this airtight case against death with nothing more than 14 lines of poetry. And it just makes you wonder, doesn't it? Can an argument, just a shift in perspective crafted with words alone, truly diminish the power of our greatest fear? In the end, can words actually make us fearless? Today, we're going to dive into a single 14-line poem written over 400 years ago that just packs an incredible emotional punch. It's one of John Donne's Holy Sonnets. Now, these poems are known for being super intellectual, full of wit, and these really startling comparisons. But this one is also deeply personal. It was most likely written after the death of his wife, Anne, and it takes us on this fascinating journey from just profound grief all the way to a radical new understanding of God's love. Right from the start, the poem just hits you. There's no gentle lead-in, just the raw, immediate fact of loss. The speaker's beloved is gone. And listen to that language. It's not just that she died. He says, "My good is dead." It's like his entire source of goodness and happiness in the world has just been completely extinguished.
So, how does a person even start to process a new reality that's this devastating? Well, that's what we're going to explore first.
You know, that phrase, "a debt paid to nature," is a pretty formal, almost philosophical way to talk about death. It's almost like he's trying to put this enormous loss into a neat, intellectual box. But you can feel the raw emotion just bleeding right through, especially with that line, "My good is dead." His personal world isn't just sad, it's fundamentally broken. And the immediate result of this loss, it's a total 180-degree shift in his focus. Because she's gone, and look at that word he uses, ravished into heaven. That suggests a powerful, almost forceful divine taking. His attention is literally yanked away from the earth. With his earthly good now gone, well, the only place left for him to look is up. His mind is now wholly, completely set on heavenly things. But this isn't just about escaping the pain of grief. In this next part, you'll see the speaker start to transform that past love into a new kind of fuel, really, for a spiritual quest. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. He makes this turn. His love for her wasn't some distraction from God. No, it was the very thing that sharpened his mind to go looking for God in the first place. He's basically saying that the very act of admiring her, of loving her so deeply, is what actually prepared him for the search. And he gives us this just beautiful metaphor to explain it. Her love was like a stream, and by following that stream, he eventually finds the head, the source, which for him is God. The idea here is so powerful. This perfect earthly love isn't something separate from divine love. It's actually a reflection of it, a pathway leading you right back to the origin of all love. And now we get to the poem's most complex and, honestly, startling image. This is where the speaker's spiritual journey takes a really unexpected, almost paradoxical turn. So get this. He succeeded. He followed the stream to the source. He says, "I have found thee, and thou my thirst hast fed." So you'd expect him to feel satisfied, right? Finally at peace? But no. Instead, he says he's afflicted with a holy thirsty dropsy. What on earth does that even mean? Okay, so to really get this metaphor, we need a quick history lesson. Dropsy was an old medical term for what we'd now call edema. It was a condition where the body swells up with fluid, but the person feels this agonizing, unquenchable thirst. The more they drink, the thirstier and more swollen they actually become. And that is the paradox of his spiritual state. The more of God's love he takes in, the The more his thirst is fed, the more he just swells with this intense desire for even more. And this isn't a complaint. It's this profound description of what a relationship with the divine is like. To know God is to desire God infinitely. That thirst is never actually meant to be quenched.
This all leads us to the poem's stunning conclusion, where the whole perspective shifts from the speaker's search for God to God's active pursuit of him. And then it hits him like a revelation. He's been begging for more love, but then he realizes God is already right there actively wooing his soul. And just look at the terms of this deal. God is offering all thine, all of his divine love, as a direct replacement for the human love he lost. I mean, it's just an incredible offer.
And this is the final conflict, which this breakdown really lays out perfectly. See, God isn't just wooing him in a vacuum. God is worried about the competition. On one side, you have all these worldly rivals that could distract the speaker. Saints, angels, the world, the flesh, the devil. And on the other side, God's total, all-consuming love offered up in exchange. And it all comes down to this final, absolutely astonishing phrase, tender jealousy. God isn't some distant, abstract power here. In Donne's vision, God is an intimate, passionate, and even possessive lover who is afraid of being put out. He wants every single scrap of the speaker's devotion, and he is tenderly, powerfully jealous of anything that might get in the way. So we're left with this question that just hangs over the entire poem. The speaker used his earthly love as a path, like a stream, to find God. But the poem ends with God seeing all earthly things, even good things, as potential rivals. It really makes you wonder, is our human love a stepping stone to the divine? Or is it ultimately the biggest obstacle to the kind of total devotion that God demands? All right, so let's jump right in. We're going to talk about a prayer today. But, this is not your typical, quiet, gentle kind of prayer. Nope. This is a poem almost 400 years old that sounds less like a plea for peace and more like someone picking a fight with God. Seriously, it's one of the most intense and, frankly, shocking poems ever written, and we're about to find out why. I mean, just listen to that first line, batter my heart. He doesn't say touch my heart or open my heart. He says batter it. Right from the get-go, it's this violent, direct command. This isn't a request for a gentle nudge. It's a demand for a full-on assault. And that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Why on earth would someone of faith pray for violence against themselves? It seems completely backward, totally upside down. But to get why he's making this shocking request, we first have to understand the war that's raging inside the speaker's soul. So how does Donne even begin to explain this feeling? Well, he builds the entire poem around one single powerful image. To really understand the prayer, you have to picture the battlefield he's describing. He wants you to imagine his soul as a captured town. And here's how he lays it out. He says his soul is like a town that's been usurped, which is just a fancy old word for being illegally taken over by a new ruler. He's trapped inside, trying his best to open the gates for the rightful king, who is God, but he just can't do it. He's totally powerless. So let's just break this down. It makes the whole drama of the poem super clear. The soul, that's the town under occupation. God is the rightful ruler who's been kicked out. God's enemy, you can think of this as sin or Satan, whatever you want, is the illegal usurper who's now in charge. And the speaker's own reason, which is supposed to be the town's guard, has been captured. It's either too weak to fight back, or even worse, it's switched sides. The whole system is corrupt from the inside out. But here's the thing. This internal war isn't just some clever literary idea. To really feel the poem's power, you have to look at the guy who actually wrote it, John Donne himself. This isn't just a writing exercise for him. It's a raw look into a deeply conflicted life. The desperation you hear in these lines, it's coming from a very real place. Donne's life was one of massive extremes, constantly pulled between the sacred and the profane, between his spirit and his body. The battle for this usurped town was a battle he fought every single day of his life. In fact, a recent biography of him just nails it with this one phrase. It describes Donne as a man of both piety and lust. And that's the key. He wasn't one or the other. He was fiercely and passionately both, a lot of the time all at once.
So on one hand, you've got this very pious dean. Donne eventually became the dean of St. Paul's Cathedral in London. I mean, one of the most powerful religious jobs in all of England. But on the other hand, you have the passionate poet from his younger days, a guy famous for writing some of the smartest, wittiest, and, pretty lustful love poems of his era. This poem is basically the sound of those two guys at war inside one man's soul. Okay, so once you get that this guy was basically at war with himself, the language, all those violent words, starts to make a bit more sense. The speaker feels like his situation is so desperate, so extreme, that normal, gentle words just aren't going to cut it anymore. And check out this incredible contrast he sets up. He basically says, look, God, you've tried the gentle approach. You've come to knock, breathe, shine, and seek to mend. But the speaker is saying, that's not enough. It's not working. The enemy inside is just too powerful. He needs God to break, blow, burn, and make me new. He's basically escalating the whole negotiation, demanding overwhelming force because all the polite requests have failed. And the problem goes even deeper than that. The speaker doesn't just feel occupied. He feels like he's legally bound to the enemy. He actually uses the language of marriage to describe his relationship with sin. He cries out, I am betrothed unto your enemy. Betrothed, like he's engaged to be married to sin. He feels totally trapped in a contract, and that's why he begs God to divorce me, untie or break that knot again. A simple breakup won't do. He needs a violent, forceful severing of this bond. So you see, this extreme language isn't just for shock value. It's really a desperate search to find words that are strong enough to match the feeling of a spiritual crisis. I mean, how do you ask to be saved when you feel like you've already legally promised your soul to the other side? Well, you ask for a miracle, and you ask for it with everything you've got. And all of this builds to the poem's absolutely breathtaking conclusion. It's where all this violence and desperation come together in one of the most famous paradoxes in all of literature. It just completely flips our normal way of thinking on its head. So let me just ask you this. How can being imprisoned be the only way to be set free? And even more shockingly, how can being violated, ravished, be the only way to become pure and chaste? It sounds impossible, right? And yet that is Donne's stunning answer. He says it right there. He will never be free unless God enthralls him, basically makes him a slave. And he will never be chaste or spiritually pure unless God ravages him. It is the final, ultimate, mind-bending plea. What we're looking at here is a perfect literary paradox. It's a statement that seems to totally contradict itself, but when you look closer, it actually reveals a much deeper truth. Donne is using this trick to talk about a spiritual reality that, normal logic just can't quite explain. So the poem's final argument is really this. To be truly free from the tyranny of sin, the speaker has to become a willing captive of God. His own will is just too weak. And to be spiritually pure, he has to be so completely overwhelmed by a divine love so powerful that it actually feels like a violation to his old sinful self. And in the end, this violent, shocking prayer from 400 years ago leaves us with a question that's still so incredibly relevant. When there's some part of you that's holding you captive, when your own willpower and reason have failed you, what does it actually take to break free and become new?